Good morning. Thank you all for coming. We're going to begin right on the hour in a minute or two here.
Hey everyone, it is right on the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to JobNimbus 101 workshop on automations. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Colby.
My name is Daniel.
And I'm Logan, and it is a pleasure to have you all here today. We're going to talk about one of the coolest parts of JobNimbus, which is automations. Automations allow you to, automate repetitive tasks in order to save you time and make your day a little less busy. Now, automations are one of the more complex parts of JobNimbus by a little bit, so I'm sure you're going to have some questions. We're going to have a few points in the presentation where we're going to stop, and Colby will give us any questions that have come in through chat. And at the end, we'll try and have some time where we can open up the forum and everybody can ask some more questions. But to start with, we need to give you an overview of what we're talking about, starting with what is an automation? Dan, you want to go for this?
Thank you, Logan. We are super excited to talk to you today about automations. Real quick, we have a poll, so you can answer that while I tell you what JobNimbus automations are. So take a quick moment to read through that question and answer it. Automations are tiny little programs in JobNimbus that can work like your personal assistant. These programs are very simple and use conditions to trigger actions to save you time. You can use JobNimbus to send emails, create tasks, or even update the status of a contact or job based on a number of different conditions, including, but not limited to, the completion of a task, the amount of time a contact has spent in a status, and the status of a material order or work order. You can easily add an automation to your JobNimbus account. First, click on your name in the top right corner and select Settings from the drop-down menu. Settings access is specifically for subscribed and trial users with admin access. If you don't see settings in your drop-down menu, make sure to update your subscription. If you are subscribed and don't see settings, speak to someone on your team who has admin access. In your settings, select Automation from the left side navigation bar. This takes you to your automations page where you can create, view, and edit the automation rules you have created. To create a new rule, click on the Add Rule button in the top right corner of the automation rule panel. This will pull up the Add Automation Rule window, where you can use the trigger type drop-down to choose between creating an event-based and time-based automation. These may seem a bit daunting at first, but don't worry. We'll explain these two different types of rules right now.
All right, the first kind is an event-based automation. These are the simpler of the two by a little bit, and they basically say, when a thing happens, do a different thing. An event-based automation is basically an if-then statement. For instance, if such and such has happened, then perform a task. There's a few different parts of it. You've got a name. The trigger type we're always going to choose is event-based, and then the trigger record. Then the if part of the condition, the if part of the automation is a condition, and the then is an action. People ask us all the time, what should I name my automation? And to be honest, it doesn't matter very much, at least not to the program. Just choose something that you're going to remember. You can choose the trigger record from among what you see here. Usually we're using contacts, tasks, or activities, but there's uses for all of these in the system. Once you've chosen your trigger record, you'll want to add at least one condition, and that is again your if part. Here we're choosing if the task type is equal to project assessment. The options that you'll have will be based on the trigger record, and any contact fields that you added to the system will be available in your contacts. The then portion is our actions. You can choose to create a task, send an email, use a webhook if you're tied in with something like Zapier, or in most cases, to change the status of a contact or job. You can use an event-based automation for anything that has to happen right now. For instance, when you create a new contact, when you change something in status, anything like that is great for an event-based automation. Now, people ask us all the time, and this is the most common question, why is my automation triggering way too often? Or why is it not triggering at all? And often that's tied into the condition. You'll notice on most conditions that there is a little box that says only if blank is modified, or blank is the property that we're using as a condition. If that's marked, then the automation will only trigger if that particular property is being changed. So in this example, if the type is equal to residential retail, that means that it will only trigger when we've changed the workflow type to residential retail. Since we're not doing that very often in the system, if this is marked, you're usually just not going to trigger the automation at all. But if this was status is equal to residential retail instead, well, we change status all the time. And often we want to have something happen only when the status is changed. If this was a status type and we had that unchecked, then every time the contact was in that status and we did something, the system would check, say, yep, it's in that status, let's do the thing. And you can get way more automation triggers than you actually want. So that is one particular question. Do we have any other that have come through in chat, Colby? And if not, then we can give a second to see if anything else comes through. Can we email the presentation? Yes, we are going to email the presentation. After it's done, you'll have access to the slide deck. Anything else? All right, well then let's get on to the other type of trigger, which is time-based. Dan, do you want to talk to us about time-based automations?
Yes, thank you. Time-based automations are the other type of rules you can create in JobNimbus, where event-based automations are a bit more simple. Time-based automations can be slightly more complicated, but only slightly. Don't worry, we will break down time-based automations for you right now. A time-based automation rule is a program that basically says, run an action a set amount of time after a certain condition or conditions are met. So basically, when a thing happens, wait a certain amount of time, then do a thing. You can also run an action a set amount of time before a task start date and time. As you can see, the time-based automation rule is much like the event-based automation rule. You can name the rule to something descriptive for your team, choose a trigger record, and even add conditions and actions. You'll notice here what's different is that there's an option to choose when to run the automation. You can choose a set number of minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, even years before or after specific triggers in the trigger record, such as the date a record was created, the date the record status changed, the date the record was last updated, or even the end or start date and time for a task. Sorry, these triggers may change depending on trigger record chosen. Time-based automations can be used for all sorts of great rules that help save you time, make you less busy, and ultimately make running your business more efficient. These examples here are just a few of the ways you can build your time-based automation rules. These examples can really help you eliminate repetitive tasks and run your business by automating your workflow, sending reminder emails, and notifying team members when something has or even when something hasn't happened in JobNimbus. One question we get a lot about time-based automations is, what's the difference between the date, status changed, and date updated options for triggering the record? As you can see here, these options are right next to each other in the dropdown. While the date status change option will only trigger the automation based on when the date of the trigger record, such as a contact or a job, last changed its status, the date updated option triggers based on when the record was last updated in any way, such as when a note was made, a document was uploaded, or anything that has been done within the record. Whereas you may want to use the date status changed option to run an automation if a contact has sat in the lead status for more than 3 days or anything else like that, you may want to run an automation to remind you to look at a contact if no one has touched it in about a week or so. I would like to open this up to further questions. Colby, have any questions come in about time-based automations?
Not
If
yet.
not, okay, we can give you a moment to type them out if you would like and send them in. And remember, you have time at the end as well. You'll be able to raise your hand and we'll let you ask your question. We'll answer it at the end. So now that we have a good understanding of what automation rules can be used for and the difference between event-based automation and time-based automations, let's build some rules together.
All right, let's start by answering a poll first of all, and then we're going to build an event-based automation. All right, so often when we build an automation, first we're going to have to do a little bit of background work. In this case, we want to build a task that will trigger based on the completion of another task. And we're going to build a task type first. So head into your settings, go to the task type tab on the left-hand side, and choose the add type button on the right. Once you've done that, you'll get a screen that looks a lot like this, and we can add whatever we want as far as the name goes. Again, doesn't matter too much to the system, it's just what matters to you. For this, we're going to choose project assessment, because that's the sort of task that we're going to want to be doing. Once we've gotten our background work done, we're going to want to do two things. First, whenever I add a new task type, a field, or anything else, I like to refresh the page, and that will make sure that I have access to that field when I go back to make my automation rule. Then I'll go to the automation section and click on the add rule up on the right-hand side. First thing we're always going to do is add a name. Once again, doesn't matter to the system, but we do want to give it something that we're going to remember. In this case, create estimate. We're going to leave the trigger type as event-based, and then we're going to change the trigger record, in this case, to when a task is modified. After that, it's time to build our conditions. So we'll click the Add a Condition button, and it will bring up this screen. We're actually going to use two conditions in this case. The first one will be if task type is equal to project assessment, that new task type that we made. We'll leave that box unchecked because we're not going to change the task type as we go. Our second condition will be if completed is equal to true, and we will mark that as only if completed is modified. So whenever you mark the box on a task that says, yep, I finished this, then completed becomes equal to true. So now our tasks are, or our conditions are, if the task type is equal to project assessment, and if we just changed it to true. Now it's time to make the then part. We do that by adding an action. We're going to choose create task from the menu, and then we're going to be brought to this screen. We can modify the task in a number of different ways. Something we definitely need to do is give it a task name. We're going to say write-up estimate. You could also give it a description, set the start or due date of the task to later, or change the priority. Something else we definitely need to do, though, is assign it to team members. We're going to choose current assignees, but we could also choose someone particular in our system. For instance, if we always have the office write up an estimate, then when our sales guys completed an assessment, they would mark that as completed, which would create the write up estimate task. So this is what we've got overall. It's an event-based automation that says when a task is modified, if the task is a project assessment, and if we've modified it to be true, then create the task, create estimate, and we'll assign that to whoever had the first task. I bet you can see a bunch of different ways that this can be used in the future, but for now, let's go ahead and talk about a time-based automation.
Thank you, Logan. First off, it's poll time. While I get started with the next rule we cover, go ahead and answer that quick question. Well, Logan ran through creating an event-based automation rule that creates a task upon the completion of another task. The next rule we will create is time-based. This rule will send an email reminder a set time before an appointment. We will use an email template for the reminder. We will also be using a specific task type to trigger the rule, much like in the previous example. I see that you're all, they spend a lot of time sending emails, so this is going to really help you out. The first thing we will need to do is create the task type, and that will trigger the automation. So head on over to task type in settings and click on add type. We will actually be using the same task type as we did in the previous automation rule, as this email will be sent to your client reminding them that a technician will be at their home to assess what needs to be done so you can create an estimate for them. So if you already have the task type added in your JobNimbus account, don't worry about this step. If not, type out project assessment in both the task type field and in the default name. Having a specific task type is extremely important as it helps specify which tasks will trigger the automation rule. If you don't have a specific task type, the rule will be triggered by multiple different tasks and will not work as expected. The next step will be to create the email template that will be sent out with the automation. To do this, select Templates in the left side navigation bar in your settings, then click on Add Template in the upper right corner and select Email from the drop-down menu. This pulls up the email template builder. Here, you can name your template and type out your email. You can name your template whatever you want. We just name it Project Assessment Appointment Reminder so we know what this email is for. But remember that template name is descriptive for your team. When you're typing out your email, you can even use the template fields available to personalize this email for your client. I have included an extremely simple email template here that will pull the contact's first name from their file, the task start date and time, the sales rep that is assigned to the contact, so their name will be displayed right underneath sincerely, and also the company's logo, which is the logo that you uploaded into your company information section in settings. It is important to note that the template fields for task start date and task start time will only work with automation rules that are triggered by a task, or else the email template will not know what to put in there, because now once this email template is in the automation rule, it will be tied or associated with the task. Once you have finished creating your email template and typed out your email, head on over to your automations page in settings and click on Add Rule. In the Add Rule window, name your automation rule to something descriptive for you and your team. Here, we have named the rule Project Assessment Appointment Reminder. If you notice, it's also the same name as we gave the email template, so when we're looking through things, we can easily associate the two together. Then, make sure you change the trigger type to time-based, as this will allow you to send an email before your task starts. We will then change the trigger record to task. To finish setting up the trigger, choose when to run this automation. In this section, let's tell the automation to run 1 day before the appointment starts. So 24 hours prior to the task start date and time, JobNimbus will send the email out to your client, reminding them that someone will be out at their home. Now it's time to add a condition to the rule. Whereas our previous rule needed 2 conditions, we will only need 1 for this rule. That condition will be for the task type. So make sure your condition says, if task type is equal to project assessment, and then click Save. Lastly, let's add the action. So click on Add Action. In the Add Action window, choose Send Email from the drop-down menu as the action and click Continue. This is where you can choose which template to send. So choose the template you just created for this automation. Next, type in a subject line for your email. Remember, this subject is what is going to show up in your client's inbox. It's the first thing that they'll see. Then, choose who will receive the email. For this, choose All Related Contacts. All the related contacts are all the contacts associated with the task that triggered the automation. If you want, you can also add specific team members or the sales rep to loop them in and let them know what is going on. We know several of our users that like to add in the owner of the company, so that way the owner knows what's going on every step of the way. They'll just receive the email just like the client will, and it will show the client's information in there as well. After you have created the action, click Save, and make sure you also save your automation rule. Now, whenever you have an appointment to assess a project scheduled in JobNimbus and the task type is set to project assessment, JobNimbus will send the template that you created out to your clients, so they will receive a reminder email about that appointment. And with the rule that Logan created, once the project assessment task has been marked completed, you will receive a reminder task to create the estimate based on the assessment. We super appreciate you being here with us today. We hope you enjoyed talking about creating automation rules and perhaps learned a thing or two as well. To finish up, we would like to remind you that using automation rules will eliminate repetitive tasks, which will ultimately save you time and increase the efficiency of your company, which will allow you to take on more projects. When creating your rules, make your conditions specific so your rules act as expected. If you have to, create custom task types and custom fields so those conditions are as specific as possible. And lastly, watch that modified checkbox in your conditions with the event-based automation rules. If your automation rule is triggering more than you expected or at odd times, you may need to make sure that the modified checkbox is checked. If you have any more questions, it looks like we have some time right now to answer a few. So raise your hand. Colby will unmute you, and we'll talk and we'll answer your questions. So please, if you have any questions, if you think of anything, go ahead and raise your hand.
Hi, there is one that did come in from Carrie. She mentions, is there any way that we can automate text messages to our customers? Not all of them provide an email or read their email regularly.
So there is not in JobNimbus proper. However, we do have a few integrations, particularly through our partner Zapier and text services provided by them, that do allow you to send texts. If you go to our support website, which we'll give you a link to in just a second, and search for texting, there will be an article on how to set that up.
I'd also like to point out that we do have an integration with Podium, and that is what they do. They send out automated texts. So the integration is basically when a contact is moved into a specific status, it will fire off the automation in Podium that will send that automated text to your contact. So there are a few different integrations that we have that will solve that for you. That was an excellent question. Thank you, Carrie. Are there any others?
There is another one that came in. Will you be offering a way to integrate Podium?
Yes, Podium is already integrated. If you go to our support knowledge base website, which we'll give you a link to in a second, you can type in Podium and you can learn how to integrate with it. And if you contact Podium itself, you can talk to them talk to their team, and they will help you, and they will also walk you through and work with you to integrate with JobNimbus.
And it looks like Devin gave you the link right there to our Podium article.
Oh, perfect.
That will be awesome. Thanks, Devin. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we're about ready to wrap up. Colby, do you want to end us here?
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope that this was a useful workshop. Thanks so much, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day.